Hello and welcome to today's video. Today's video is another lens review, this time the Fujinon XF 90mm f2.0 R LM WR. There she is. That's what aperture 2.0 looks like. It's pretty cool. So welcome to another prime lens review. As I mentioned, this is the Fujinon XF 90mm f2. I think choosing a lens is an even more personal decision than choosing the camera system. We all have our preferences of what we like to create in our photos and how we like to create them, and choosing the lens is a huge portion of that in determining how we go about doing that. So lens choices are full of opinions. Lens reviews obviously are full of opinions, and I will share mine in this review. Full disclosure, Fujifilm USA has loaned me this lens for 30 days with no expectations of anything really, except to return it at the end of 30 days, which I plan to do. This lens review will follow the format of, I'll do an introduction here, then we'll talk about some of the physical characteristics of this lens, talk about the performance of this lens, image quality, and then at the end there will be a conclusion and all that stuff, including a recommendation and my Doughnut rating of this lens. So feel free to use the chapter marker below to skip to the place that you're most interested in this review. And then at the end of the video, the very end of the video, will be a slideshow of about 10 photos that I've taken with this lens. And also in the description below will be a link to a Flickr album containing, I think, 25 or 27 photos that I've taken with this lens. So there you go. Let's get started. Let's start with the physical characteristics of this lens. As you can see, it's a relatively large lens, especially to make room for that f2.0 aperture, which takes, oh, there's my forehead. There you go. Which just physically requires more stuff. Let's take a look at this compared to some of the other Fujinon lenses that are maybe in the similar ballpark, and let's see what they look like. So first, we'll start off with comparing it to its probably closest sibling, which would be the 80mm f2.8 macro lens. So here on the right, we have the 90, and then on the left is the 80. So the 80 is a very, very large lens. As you can see, the 90 is smaller than that, even though it is faster at f2.0 and longer in focal length at 90mm. The 80 is kind of, because it's a macro, is also part of the reason it's so much larger. Let's take a look compared to a 2.0 prime, another 2.0 prime, this time the 50mm. As you can see, the 50 is teeny tiny compared to the 90. And lots lighter. This is a nice dense lens with lots of glass in here, fewer lens elements, I believe, in the 50. So one of the reasons it can be smaller. And next, let's compare it to a zoom lens. So this time we'll compare it to the 16 to 80mm f4.0 zoom lens. When it's collapsed at its shortest focal length at 16mm, it is the 90mm is larger, but when you zoom out this lens to 80mm, it does become larger. So that gives you a sense of the size of the 90mm. Other things to talk about physically with this lens, it's an all metal construction, very solid. It's got a nice feel to it. It feels like quality. I don't know how else to say that except to say it feels like quality. The focus ring is very smooth. I don't use manual focus on Fuji lenses because of the focus by wire that I just can't seem to figure out. But it's there if you want it, and it feels nice. And then the aperture ring is super nice and firm in its clickiness. It seems like this is the Goldilocks of clickiness. By that I mean it's a firm click to each aperture stop, but it's not so firm that it's hard to move, and it's not so loose that it's going to get bumped accidentally, which is something I experienced with the 80mm. It's a pretty loose clickiness. I don't know if that's the actual engineering term they use, but this is kind of the Goldilocks clickiness level that, at least for my personal taste. So next, let's talk a little bit about performance of this lens as far as at least focusing and those kind of things. And in my experience, this lens focused very quickly. It has a linear motor, which sounds neat. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how it's different than other kinds of motors, but I know that it's really quick focusing with this lens, and it's also very, very quiet. So that's quite nice. My experience of this lens is similar to my experience with other Fujinon longer focal length lenses. And this may be unique, somewhat unique to me in the way I create photos. I tend to get relatively close to small objects like flowers or plant stems. And when you get close, you approach the minimum focusing distance with a lens like this, it wants to focus on the background. It has a hard time grabbing focus on those fine details that are relatively close to the lens. Again, I think that's a function primarily of the way Fuji's autofocus algorithm works, because I've experienced it on multiple lenses. I figured out how to work around that and still create photos of small objects that are relatively close to the lens. So it's doable. So here's an example of that kind of image I'm talking about, where I'm trying to create an image of this grass stalk against a bunch of other grass stalks that are relatively far away. And I'm only about 2-3 feet away from this. It's really close to the minimum focusing distance of this lens. And it hunts a little bit. It gets stuck on that background for focus. So I found that if you point the lens down, get it focus on the ground, and then come back up with the shutter button half pushed down to retain focus, then it'll focus at that point. So image detail on this is amazing. This lens is pretty spectacular for detail and sharpness and quality. Oh my goodness, it just blew me away. This lens has a well-deserved reputation for excellent image quality. And it did not disappoint. I was even looking at the back of the on the back screen of my camera and just literally blown away by the quality. As you can see here, we've got some amazing background fall off here of just blurriness at f2.0. That's pretty spectacular as well. Here's another image at f2.0. This was one of the few portraits I made while I had the lens. This is my son's dog, Keanu, and this is at ISO 6400 in our living room, and getting the look. But it's amazing, the quality here. It's just a lovely rendering of foreground to background, and it's just quite a... this is what this lens was built for portraits, for details, for separation of subject from the background. It does an amazing job. Speaking of other things related to image quality with this lens, I didn't notice any fringing, flaring, and even any vignetting. So again, from a technical standpoint, as it translates then into an aesthetic standpoint, this lens is amazing, Of course, knowing me, I'm going to talk a little bit about the bokeh on this lens and how it behaves. You've seen a little bit of it in these two previous photos. And it's just got a really nice, smooth, and well-formed bokeh, for want of a better phrase. It's just as you expect it. It's lovely. So here's an example of just some blurry balls of light. This is my highly technical test for the appearance of bokeh. It's awesome. Nice and round in the center at f2.0 here. Does go a little bit more oval, cat's eye shaped as you get to the edges, but that's relatively common. But it's a lovely looking, quiet, calm, gentle, for want of a better phrase, bokeh. So moving on to conclusions and recommendations for this lens. Some lenses tend to be and lend themselves to being general purpose, multi-purpose. They can do lots and lots of different things in lots and lots of different situations. And some lenses, like the Fujinon XF 90mm, tend to be designed to perform their best in certain situations and in certain subject settings. And the 90mm has a well-deserved reputation for image quality that I was just blown away by. This lens, I think, would be a great partner for a portrait or wedding photographer, especially doing close head and shoulder kind of photos, or in small group situations, 2 or 3 folks in the photo. Another good use case for this would be any place where you can really control the environment and control the lighting, have the camera on a tripod, because this lens really rewards those kind of controlled situations with its excellent detail and image quality. So in the end, for me, I think this lens may be too good for me. Here's what I mean. This lens really rewards patience and precision and the space to work. And my personal preference for photography is to be able to be more flexible and fast moving and responsive to whatever photographic environment I'm in. So I prefer lenses that are more flexible rather than chasing after that last 5 to 10% of sharpness and maybe image quality that this lens excels at. So to explain that a little bit further, once I experienced the amazing quality of this lens, what happened was I was getting frustrated when I couldn't consistently do that photo after photo. Oftentimes there would be, I was trying to take a picture of a plant and there was a little breeze blowing. So any kind of little movement in the subject is amplified, even at relatively fast shutter speeds, because this lens has so much detail. Or in cases where I'm needing to use slightly longer shutter speeds due to low light, and this lens does not have optical image stabilization, so it doesn't help me out when I'm doing the kind of camera shaky things at those slower shutter speeds. So it's not you, Fujifilm XF 90mm f2.0 R LM OIS, it's me. So in the end, for me, I really like this lens, but it's just not a good fit for me. The image quality, you can't argue with it. The quality of the build, you can't argue with it. But as I mentioned at the beginning, lens choices are very, very personal. And for me, this lens just doesn't fit what I'm currently doing with the photos I'm creating. So for me, this lens will get 4.5 out of 5 donuts for that simple reason. Again, it's not the lens, it's me. I don't quite live up to the expectations of this lens. So that's the reason for the 4.5 out of 5 donuts. So I hope you found this a little bit helpful, entertaining, informative. You have a little more information than when you started this video. If you have comments or experiences you'd like to share with this lens or questions you have about it, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. As I mentioned, coming up when I finish this outro piece will be a slideshow featuring about 10 photos with this lens set to music. And you can look forward to that in just a moment. If you want to skip ahead, go for it. At this point, I am obliged by YouTube law, practice, and tradition to ask you to subscribe to this channel, where you will receive more videos like this at the pace of about 1 a week. Also, if you subscribe, you get notifications about when I do live streams and other things like that. If you like this video, that would help a bunch in getting more people to see it if you would hit that like button. Also trains the YouTube algorithm about videos that you feel are high quality, worthy of watching, and want to see more of. So there you go. A wrap up of the Fujinon XF 90mm f2.0. A wonderful lens, just not so much for me. Anyway, until we meet again in a future video, watch the slideshow and then go out and have fun creating more photos. Stay safe, stay well, and until we meet again, bye for now.